All right. And we're back. What did you write? You just wrote something down.
I know I just wrote 33 because I was thinking we're on 34.
Oh, no, we're starting at 33.
33, that's what I wrote.
Chapter 33.
Brilliant.
Jacob meets Esau.
Yeah. So where we left off last week, Jacob's on his way back to the land of his father. And as he gets closer, he is starts to freak out a little bit because his brother and just how he left things. And so this is also at the point where he wrestles with God. He's got this name change. But here he is again, kind of starting to deceive again, right?
Yep. Well, not deceive. Again, he's in self-preservation.
He's self-preservation, yeah.
But he is trying, he's attempting a reconciliation too.
Mm-hmm.
I do think this is a turning point for Jacob.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, he bows down to Esau, which part of the blessing that he stole from Esau was that his brother was going to bow down to him. And so he's trying to give him presents. So he's trying to give back a lot of what he tried to steal from Esau in the beginning.
So
and
maybe,
they do end reconciled.
Yeah, and maybe it's like he's humbled himself a little bit, but he's still...
He's recognizing that maybe what he did was wrong.
Yeah.
And he's trying to recompense. He's trying to give it back. But he's still fearful.
Yeah.
And then Esau actually offers him grace. Esau, the one that's not chosen.
It's weird as characters have defining traits. And so, Jacob, this deceiver, it's so everything he does, you're looking through the lens of deceiver. So even the bowing down, it's is he really bowing down? Is he really but it's interesting.
I mean, I think he's really bowing down, hoping this guy won't kill me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, I think he finally is, again, he's at the end of himself. He can't finagle his way out of this. He's trying to, but he really can't, which is why he has to bow down and offer back what he tried to steal. And he also had a name change, which that really does matter when we're studying the Bible, which means he is different now. So something has changed in him that God has recognized.
So you said in the last podcast that was this the blessing
right.
that...
Yes, bow down. So it's the blessing, the flourishing. So it's your brother's going to serve you. Your brother's going to bow down to you. You're going to have all the blessings of livestock and the earth. And then he tries to give all of that back to Esau. So you see him offer to be a servant. He calls him my Lord. Yeah. He bows down to him. So he's saying, sorry, I'm giving it all back. Please don't kill me.
Yeah. Maybe it is a little bit I'm sorry. I mean, we don't see that in so many words, but do you think he's sorry? I think or does it not matter?
Well, I don't know about his emotional state or sincerity, but I think that is what he's offering.
Yeah.
It's this offer of, I'm trying to give back what I stole from you.
Yeah. And it's interesting, clear here where I'd underlined it. Now he is saying he's trying to find favor in sight of the Lord. So he is kind of trying to walk a righteous path, or he does at least recognize that, he wants to do right in the sight of, or is he talking about find favor in the Lord like Esau? I don't know.
Which verse are you in?
Well, that would be 8. Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company that Matt and Jim has to find favor in the sight of my
Esau.
Lord?" So he's talking about Esau there.
Yeah, that's
okay.
in Esau.
So he's calling him my Lord, though.
Okay.
So he's his servant, and
then he keeps
Esau
saying
his
it because
Lord.
then he says it again later on.
Mm-hmm. That's the supplication that he's coming to Esau with.
Yeah.
So I think the turn maybe in Jacob that I see is just this recognition of who God is, who he has been, his continued patience, that God is the one who's blessed him to come back with all of this stuff and all of this prosperity and all these people and this giant family. And so he's going to live into this covenant promise that, started with his grandfather. But he's also not going to be perfect. I mean, as the story unfolds, you see he favors one child over the other, even at the expense of his life, at least he thinks. He's not perfect.
Yeah. Well, and even here, right after that encounter with Esau, it's like they've reconciled, they've made all right, and he's like, "All right, hey, you go ahead, I'll meet you there."
Yeah, and
doesn't even go there.
That's right.
Yeah.
He goes a different direction.
Yeah. And what you consistently see in these cycles in Genesis is, we have this moment whenever there's this renewed covenant, whenever one of our characters, heroes, comes to the end of themselves and they just have total faith and surrender to God. And then the next chapter's, and then they all mess everything up again,
Yeah.
which is what we're about to see. But I do think he finally realized this is from God. I didn't have to grasp it.
Yep.
God was always going to give it to me. He said it before I was born. He didn't have to steal it. God was the one blessing. He couldn't do it on his own. So he can offer it back to Esau, knowing that God is with him.
Yep.
Yeah. And in the next chapter, things get not cool.
And I was so excited whenever a daughter was mentioned
Yeah.
a couple chapters ago. I was like, oh, there's all these sons. Oh, look, there's a daughter. That's so exciting. I wonder what's going to happen with her. It's not good.
No.
Poor Dinah.
Yeah. So Dinah is out and about, and the locals, yeah.
One of them takes
He
her.
saw her, he seized her. Again, notice that language. He saw and he took. He saw and he took. He saw and he took. We see that over and over again. It's back to Genesis 3. Oh, we thought we were okay again. Nope, it's the fall again. This guy sees her and he takes her. And then there's all these repercussions because of it.
Yeah. And so, yeah, then her brothers are upset,
Yeah.
even with Jacob.
Because it's an honor shame culture. So, so this guy has brought shame to not just her, not just about defiling her and harming her and abusing her, but the whole family is now shamed because of this.
Yeah. And so they kind of sneak in and
Well,
There's more deceit.
yeah, more deceit. They're
Well,
like, they lie to him.
yeah.
Like, hey, let's make an agreement. Because again, when they went to Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, this guy that took her, doesn't just want her one time. He wants her forever. And so they lie, her brothers lie about, this is how we can have this promise, this covenant.
Yeah.
And convince a whole group of men, a village, whatever, however many this is, to circumcise
get
themselves.
circumcised. Yeah.
So that they can trade women, which again, is just wild. Just stop and think about the difference in lifestyle and culture that they, like what was normal for them is not normal for us at all. But yeah, it's worth putting yourself into the ancient culture for a moment. And you read the story, and I don't know about you, but I like every time I read this, some part of me loves the justice.
Yeah.
Like,
Do they just get?
they just go take for themselves.
Well,
And I'm not saying that's the right part of me. I'm just,
yeah, there's a little bit of justice, but then what they do, I mean, I don't know. It says that, what do they say? All their wealth and all their little ones and their wives, all that was in the houses, they captured and plundered.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. So I think a couple things. Remember that the main concern, which is why there's a lot about infertility and there's a lot about the blending of households and childbirth, is because we're talking about the seed, right? That's the promise in Genesis 3. It's the promise to Abraham. Your seed is going to bless all nations. That's how God's going to restore the whole world, is through the seed. That's why we're so focused on this. So this is a danger to the covenant promise, because if the Israelites combine with this group, then they're not set apart. Then whose seed is it? We don't even know anymore. So it's about the covenant promise. But they try to take it into their own hands with violence and deceit, and it doesn't really work out.
Mm-hmm.
okay.
And then Jacob actually goes to God and prays, and then God just delivers them.
Yeah.
Whenever it's actually just in God's hands, he delivers them instead of them having to resort to violence and deceit. God does it all on his own.
Yeah. He just strikes fear into the heart of people.
And they leave.
It's crazy.
Okay. So 35. Let's pick up here.
So that's where God says, go.
Yep.
So he takes care of it. Go to Bethel. And then they have this renewed covenant again.
And there's this whole thing of, put away the foreign gods that are among you and purify yourselves and change your garments. And that was just interesting, the recognition here that God's basically saying, like, look, you got to get away from all this other stuff you're doing, like a precursor to some of the...
What will happen
The
over
first-
and over
yeah.
with Israel.
And again, remember when this is recorded, the people have just hundreds of years later have left Egypt, and they've been worshiping other gods, and this is important for them to hear that God's been saying this from the beginning.
Yeah.
Put the other gods away. I am the God. I'm your God.
And even just the next verse there, God who answers me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I've gone. It just like speaks to the relational aspect that, it seems like he has at this point now.
Yeah, and you do see a difference in Jacob here. I mean, instead of him being the one who comes up with a plan to take care of everything, he's the one who instead, rejects idolatry and goes and follows God's command. He's obedient. He has faith in God instead of trying to have a plan on his own.
Yeah. So then they, I guess they journeyed. They left there. And then we get this other blessing again, like where he comes to him again.
He reiterates his covenant
Yeah.
after Jacob's faithfulness to him.
But it's at the same place, right? It's back to the same place where he had the dream in Bethel, right?
Go up to Bethel.
Yeah. So yeah, clearly it was a special place. And then this is really, well, he says his name, he said he gave him a new name back in, what was that, 30 to the end of the last one, after he wrestled with God. But then it's
this reiteration of both things. You're
Yeah.
a different person, and my covenant is with you. I'm your God. You're my people. It's really how we saw the covenant reiterated a couple times with Abraham. It's a similar idea. It's you're faithful to me, and so I'm renewing my covenant. This is who you are. This is who I am for you.
Yeah. And then we get the death of his parents.
Well, his wife. And
Or his wife,
dad.
sorry.
His dad.
Rachel, yeah. His wife and his dad, Isaac.
His wife dies giving birth. His favorite wife. But he still has 3 more,
yeah.
so.
So how favorite are you?
Right.
Yeah. Jeez.
Yes.
feel like
And so
we
that's
missed
the
these.
end of Isaac's, that's the end of his story. And so that's you see Esau's descendants next, so this is sort of the end of that story, and then we're going to get to Joseph. So this is the tail end of everything we've been talking about with this family.
So I guess this is one of those things where in 36, like you get all these different, there's chiefs and kings, and there's just all these crazy names and people. I mean, this was important for them. Why?
It's part of their history. It helps define the nations and the people that are around Israel at the time this was.
But this was
written down.
Esau's side.
That's right. But from Esau comes the Edomites, for example. Well, that's adjacent to the territory of Israel, the promised land, where when this is all written down, the people have left Egypt and Moses is leading them toward this promised land where these people are living
Yeah.
hundreds of years later. And so it helps give definition to who's there,
Who's
where
there,
they
how
come
they're
from.
connected.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, even in the next story, whenever the people who buy Joseph, they're Ishmaelites, which we know Ishmael,
yeah.
right? So, I mean, it's just a story of all of their people in the surrounding areas
Yeah.
and how they relate to one another.
So that day when you read of all these things, it's important to just know, yeah, it was important for them.
This
for
is their
that reason.
history.
This is their history.
Yeah. And I mean, even, I don't know how many times I've read this, but I read through it and so much of it is lost on me just because I don't know all these names and I don't know all these places. That's
Yeah.
just the way it is going to be for me and probably most of us
Yeah.
when we read all this.
But for these people, or the original reader,
Yeah.
who it was written to, I mean, this was very much, they knew that.
Right.
They
Yeah.
knew who that was.
Well, even in 35, I mean, just again with these stories, his descendants doing the same things. You see 35:22, while Israel lived in that land, Reuben went and lay with, I don't know how to pronounce her name, so forgive me, but Bilhah?
Bilhah, yeah.
Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. It's a very similar story that we saw with Noah and Ham. And so
Yeah.
this is him, trying to usurp his position in the family before it's time, because that's what it meant, unfortunately, for these women. He was trying to take authority. So he was supposed to be the firstborn son with the firstborn rights, but then he does this. So he's disqualified. So it's just this little sentence, but it's there for a reason.
Yep.
Okay, let's get into 37. So Joseph, who is the youngest, not
Benjamin was the youngest.
Benjamin.
Yep.
Joseph,
Firstborn son of the loved
of
second wife.
but
Not the first
that
and the
he
third.
thought was going to be the first wife, but he was tricked.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
But we did see, which I don't think we talked about this. So, just talking about who God chooses for His line, right? He hears everyone. He opens wombs. He restores and He blesses all sorts of people. But Leah is the one whose sons will become the descendant or the ancestors for the kings and for the priests. So that's where the line is coming from, is Leah, not Rachel. So Jacob had his favorite, but that wasn't the family that God chose to continue His covenant with.
Who were the priests, the tribes that had the priests and the
Levites.
Levites.
Okay.
So you'll see that term on and on, Levites, and then
I feel like I knew that.
and then the seed of Judah, right? Judah is the king.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Again, what they thought and tried to make happen, but God has different plans and how He uses that. Okay, so Joseph has this dream, or has this series of, or these two dreams, and he shares it with his brothers. I mean, it's kind of it's the beginning of the famous story of
It's a really
Joseph.
great movie.
Yeah.
It's a great movie. Yeah.
You don't
Which
have to
one?
read this. Go
The
watch
animated
the movie.
movie.
Yeah,
The animated
I love
movie,
it.
yeah.
Is there's an animated Joseph
Oh, yeah.
movie?
The Prince of Egypt.
Prince of Egypt.
Yeah. When we were kids, that came out,
pretty
right?
good.
How
I
old?
don't remember that.
We were all about the same age. How old were we?
That came out when we were kids?
Oh yeah.
Jeez. Okay. So yeah, he has these dreams, and they're his brothers, which is interesting that they kind
Sibling
of
rivalry. Here
Yeah.
we go again.
but that they kind of interpret it was like, oh, are you trying to say this, or is that what that means?
Yeah.
Where some people, it's like, you've ever had somebody tell you, like, dude, I had this crazy dream last night. You're like, yeah, that is weird. You're not initially like, oh, that probably means this and
Yeah.
that. So,
But it's pretty like there's a sun and a moon and 11 stars and there's 12 suns and they're all bowing down to me. It's pretty clear
yeah.
what he's
I mean,
saying.
I get that, but in the moment,
Yeah.
you got to think that
Yeah.
they're probably like, oh, whatever. He's crazy. He's the favorite one. We don't.
Well, he's already the favorite one. And also, like, his coat, that implies management. So they work in the fields and he manages. And he's already told his father whenever they messed up. So there's already this, not jealousy just because he's the favorite, but his position over them.
I know.
he's claiming
I feel
more.
like I'm like summarizing a bunch of stuff, but are there things in here that's important that stand out? That's like, like, I don't know. That just point to something greater that we shouldn't miss in this, or is this just God using people to ultimately fulfill His plan and purpose?
Yep. I mean, the Joseph story is a great archetype. I mean, just he really, he probably should not have gone around talking about his dreams the way that he did, but he seems to, at just about every turn, do the right thing and be a person of character.
Yeah.
And so he's a good character, a good person to look to, a good figure to look to. However, he was mistreated. This is telling the story, as Rachel said, about the 12 tribes of Israel. And again, Reuben disqualified himself earlier. We're going to see his other brothers do that because
yeah.
they're the ones that beat him and sell him. And the story just keeps going. Yeah, he ends up in Egypt, and as a slave. Again, when he gets there, he's successful. We can jump to even 39.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying. It was weird. 38 feels like an interruption of
It
the
is.
story.
Yeah.
Well, I think so. Even just thinking about God's chosen, like, I think that messes people up. Why would God choose one and not the other? But we've seen throughout this that He blesses all people and He uses all people for His purposes and plans. His chosen people are about the seed who will one day save the whole world. So Joseph's not actually the chosen line. He's not the chosen one of God's descendants. So Judah will be. But he's using Joseph, and he is this example that we can follow, and also God is with him and uses him. But it doesn't have to just be the chosen one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then that's why we have Judah and Tamar.
Yeah, if you're reading this, you get to 38 and it feels like a speed bump. Like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Why was that there? Because Judah
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. But that's the point, is that the line for the promise goes through Judah. And when you read about Judah's kids, you realize just how messed up it all is, because his oldest son was so evil, God struck him dead, which you don't see that happen a whole lot. That's got to be pretty bad.
That happened in here?
Yeah, 38. That's how the
whole
story starts.
Yeah.
His son is married to a woman, Tamar, and the son is evil, so God strikes him dead. And he tells his
Okay.
other son, okay, the middle one, now you
Now
go.
you go and, yeah, okay.
So she can have kids and be part of the family and all of that. And Onan doesn't.
Because that was her right. Like
her right,
Lance
yeah.
said before, it was her right was to have children in this family. That's how she was protected. That's how she would survive as a female.
That's right. And then he didn't do that.
He did it once, and then the son died too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did part of the job.
Yep.
And so God said, that's evil, and struck him dead. So now
Yeah.
Judah's 2 oldest boys have been struck dead. And it doesn't say that Judah knows why, but they're all connected to Tamar. And so he's like, well, I'm not giving my 3rd son to that
Right.
lady, because
He's
maybe
definitely
she's
blaming her.
Yeah.
Right. She's a sorceress or something. Who knows?
Yes.
But he withholds his 3rd son and says, you need to go back home to your father. When this one's old enough, we'll make it happen. But he has no real intent for that.
Yeah.
And he does grow up, and Tamar sees he's not going to give me this son. So she has to take it into her own hands.
Yep. Because without children, she's back in her father's house. She's an old maid. She has no,
She has no
Yeah.
protection,
Yeah.
no security. I mean, that's the patriarchal society they lived in.
Yeah.
So then she poses as a prostitute, and then
Yeah.
Judah goes to her, and so she's pregnant, but she takes his ring and his staff, and that's like taking your driver's license. Like, okay, you're going to pay me, and I'll keep your driver's license. And then he can't find her, so he's embarrassed. He's like, okay, let's just don't tell anyone about this. It's going to be fine. And then she is pregnant, so he's like, all right, kill that. Like, finally, let's just get rid of her. I knew she was evil.
Burn her.
Burn her, because she's a sorceress, probably. Like, we knew she was bad. And then she says, no, actually, this is your child. And he says, oh, she's right, and I'm not.
Yeah.
But that's the story of the covenant people.
Yep.
That's God being faithful to his promises, even in the midst of just the worst we can do to one another.
Yeah. Picking up a prostitute on the side of the road.
Yeah, but again, when he's embarrassed, I don't think he's embarrassed that he did that. He's embarrassed that he couldn't pay her, so he just left important things with her, and now he can't find her. Like, oh, we should.
And then he was embarrassed that he wasn't faithful to what God had told him to do, instructed him to do
Yep.
in the covenant. Yeah.
When you said she's right, I mean, the word, let's see, what verse are we in?
She's more righteous.
She's more righteous. I'm trying to find, what verse are we in? 26.
Yeah.
So then Judah identified them and said, she is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. So again, I think we talked about this before. When we hear the word righteous, at least for me, some instinct in me wants to think about holiness. And that's a component of it. But righteousness, the full picture of it is right relationship and being in the right. And so he's saying, she did this right. She's the one that has created this right relationship, and I have not. Which, again, there is a component of not holiness, but doing the right thing.
But it's right standing in the covenant.
Yeah.
It's right relationship
Even
with their
though it
covenant
was
God.
deceit.
Even though it was deceit, even though she dressed like a prostitute.
He didn't say
Yeah.
she's completely righteous.
Yeah,
he said
right.
Yeah.
she's more righteous than I
Then
am.
I am. Okay.
Yeah. She's
I think that's important.
more in line with the
Yes.
covenant than I am. More right with God than I am.
But you have this little origin story. This is the line of David. And then around it is the history of the people of Israel. How did they end up in Egypt, and what does that mean about who they are and what God's doing? So you have the little story in the middle that's really important for the promises, and then you have just their whole historical context that we're going to end Genesis with.
Yeah. And I remember that it was interesting, the whole we're going to tie a scarlet thread around the hand
Yeah.
that pops out first, but then it goes back, and then I'm like, that's crazy. It's
weird.
Yeah, and it's the same idea really with Jacob and Esau. It's
Yeah.
like he was supposed to be first, but then he wasn't. The other one got out first, and then he is the one who is the ancestor of David. It's another secondborn who wasn't really supposed to be the firstborn.
All right, so let's jump back. We're kind of now back into Joseph's story. So ultimately, his brothers, they were going to kill him, and then they're like, "Oh, hey, no, let's not kill him. It'd be better for us to just sell him off. Then we don't got to deal with this." And
How about whenever the brothers go to their father, Jacob, and they say, "Hey, do you recognize this coat?" And he looks at it and he touches it and he says, "Oh yeah, this is my son." I'm like, that is such a throwback to whenever Jacob goes before Isaac and says, "Feel me," and he feels him and says, "Oh, this is my
Yeah.
son." I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
it's all happening to him what he did to his own father.
I'm sorry. I constantly feel like I'm about to sneeze. So for the last like 5 minutes, I'm like on the verge of.
Just let it rip.
I would, but it's just not coming out. Oh, so all right. So Joseph is now been sold to
Potiphar.
Yeah,
Potiphar.
Potiphar, who was what did it say? He was an officer, a captain of the guard. So he's living in his house,
Yep.
managing things, and Potiphar's wife is like, "Oh, dude, like, yeah, let's."
She wants to see and take.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just think about even just this picture that we're getting and think about Genesis 1-3, because that's what we're supposed to be thinking about all throughout this. There's a master of the house, but he's been given responsibility and oversight for all of it. And then she says, "Come and take me." And he says, "But my master's given me all this responsibility. I'm in charge of everything. There's one thing that he's forbidden me.
Yeah.
How could I go against not him, but God and take that?" I mean, we should all be thinking about Genesis 1 with who he's supposed to be the representative of the master, and then the one forbidden tree or fruit that he's not supposed to take. But he does right.
He passes the test.
He
does.
passes the test. It's unbelievable. What a great bookend. Genesis. So good.
That's why it's her favorite book now, her new favorite book. So that doesn't work out well. He gets
Yeah.
thrown
She
into
spoke to
prison.
Joseph
Yeah.
day after day, and he would not listen to her. I mean, even just listening to her voice. I mean, but he doesn't do it. He's faithful.
So then he gets thrown into prison because she, brings these claims against him because she took
Even
his
though he's
garment
innocent.
and she made it seem like, which was, just interesting.
Right. Similar to what
that
his
she couldn't
brothers
have-
did, too.
yeah,
They took the garment. Look at this.
Yeah. Yep. But then he's in prison, and we have some more dream stuff where there's a cupbearer, and who else was the other? The baker.
Yep.
And he basically interprets
Each of their dreams.
each of their dreams.
Yep.
I mean, I guess was dream interpretation? You think a common thing culturally back then that like
It was. There was a science to it, even.
Yeah. And we're going to see next week where Pharaoh has a dream and Joseph says, well, the interpretation is up to Yahweh, up to God, not up to your people. So
yeah.
let God interpret it. And he's the one that can do that.
yeah
He's really sort of the antithesis of everything that we've seen with his descendants. So he's not deceitful. He's innocent. He's faithful. He doesn't see and take. And then he completely trusts Yahweh and gives him credit for everything. He doesn't try to do things on his own. He trusts Yahweh to interpret the dreams and to provide for him. And it says Yahweh's with him. Yahweh's with him, even though he's sold into slavery and then he's in prison. I mean, it's this picture of Yahweh with those who are suffering, but also who are faithful and surrender to him. And look at the good
Yeah.
that comes.
Saves the people.
Saves the people.
Yeah. It saves the people of Egypt too.
yeah
And
Blesses
people
the
of Israel. Yeah,
nations.
blesses the nations.
Blesses Potiphar, blesses the Pharaoh, blesses all the nations.
Guys, that's next week.
It's all connected.
But think through what the promises of God are, what he's called us, his people, to be, what we've seen throughout all these distorted stories, and then just look at that with Joseph. The difference
Yeah.
as you're reading this week.
Anything else for the greater good? I think
I don't know if
covered it.
we've done this every week. I know we haven't done this every week, but it is worth, okay, we're reading through all this narrative. There's all this connection. And maybe even some people for the first time are reading this or for the first time are making these connections. It's still worth stopping to say, all right, this is the Word of God. It is supposed to shape me.
Yeah.
It's supposed to let me hear His voice, learn about who He is and what He wants for my life. So what do you do? How do you take all of this narrative and these old stories and then turn it into something that isn't just knowledge, but shapes who you are? And that's an open-ended question.
Well, I mean, for me, I just this morning when I was praying about it, I mean, I just was thinking about Paul saying, God's strength is made perfect in my weakness. I mean, that is true in every one of these stories. Whenever they actually are weak, when they surrender, when they are completely dependent upon God, then that's when they're made strong. That's when God does these amazing things, not just for them, but for everyone. And that's still true. And so for me, I've been thinking, how am I trying to be self-sufficient? How am I trying to take control of what needs to happen, even when it comes to good things? How can I be patient, because some of this takes a long time. God's timeline is long, but also just completely surrender and see what God does.
Yeah. I think an important thing for me to always remember is like when I read narratives like this, you start to think like, oh man, yeah, like this is what God did in just these people's lives. And so it's easy to think that God's at work doing things, but that I'm not necessarily always a part of that. And then to have a bigger picture of like, no, God's writing a grand story and he's using a significant, almost everybody as in some way plays a role in that. And so it's important to recognize not just that God's at work over here, but he wants to use me at work. And so what's my role in that as an unlikely person in a situation every day, and what am I going to choose? Am I going to choose to put myself in a position to be used by God or not? And so, I don't know.
Yeah, that's very good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that probably wraps it up for this week. Next week we can finally get into the rest of the Job story, and I think next week we finish off.
No, we're going to finish
Genesis. Yeah, or maybe I don't know. Is there? There may be one Exodus. Maybe we'll just finish.
But we're coming to the end of Genesis. It's the pattern. It's the fall. It's all the beginning promises that are worked out in the rest of the Bible. I mean, this is the origin story for the Israelites, for the Bible, and for all of us. This is our origin story. So, I mean, just think through, what does that mean about who we're supposed to be, how God is working throughout history and in our own lives.
Yeah, oh gosh. It just makes me want to talk about Genesis 1-3 again, because origin story not in like how, but why. God wants to partner with us, just like you were saying, every one of us, not just these people that we read about in scriptures, not just church leaders, but every person. His goal is to partner with humans for the flourishing of creation.
Yeah.
Through us, for us.
Well, thank you for listening to the Bible Reading Recap Podcast. Remember, as we read and reflect on God's Word together, we're growing in our commitment to be a people of hope with our one heart fully surrendered to Jesus. You can subscribe to receive additional resources to help you study the story of Scripture at clearcreekresources.org. We'll see you next week.